And we're live, week 7. Everybody, halfway point of the fantasy football season, regular season, if you will. We have Dr. Gene Bramall, Matt Waldman, going to run down everything going on that you need to know about leading up to these week 7 games. Fascinating day and fascinating. And this is somewhat familiar if you watched Leonard Fournette at LSU last year. And maybe this isn't a bad thing because when Fournette was trying to play through his ankle injury, he wasn't that effective. And Gene, it always helps when we look ahead and we see that Jacksonville has a bye next week. How much of this do you think is Jacksonville has a bye next week? And how much of this is a potential multi-week injury, or at least something that could affect how effective Leonard Fournette is going forward?
I didn't see anything in the mechanism that would make you think it was a multi-week injury, and they cleared him to return to the game last week. So, it didn't look like it wasn't a high ankle sprain. It doesn't look like it was something that it was a little bit of a violent mechanism because he slid and then his body kind of came over. So you can see where maybe this is a situation where they'd want him to be cautious for a week. I think the bye week is probably absolutely involved. Knowing that they've not used TJ Yeldon hardly at all this year, Chris Ivory has looked okay. They've got other options to use there and allow him to get healthy, knowing that there's some ankle stuff and foot stuff in his past history. I'm still a little bit surprised that it went down this way. We talked Thursday night, and I thought, they allowed him to run. They were going to allow him to cut on Friday. And Fournette from Wednesday into Thursday was pretty confident that he would be able to play. And I don't think it's a guarantee that he's not going to go yet, but the trend is still pretty concerning that he's going to be able to go. It's the way Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter left it this morning was that they were going to work him out in pregame, but that they weren't optimistic that they were going to clear him. And it really sounds more cautious than multi-week concern. That's what it's going to turn out to be. It's going to turn out to be 3 weeks of recovery for him, which is hopefully a way to keep him healthy for the rest of the season. But it doesn't look like something that's going to limit him, or at least hopefully won't limit him coming out of the bye week.
Matt, if you have Leonard Fournette, do you want him to play this week or do you want him to not play?
I want him to play because I think that he's performed well enough. What is he, the top fantasy back in football right now?
Right.
Why do you if you're greedy, then yes, you want him to play. But if you're sensible, then you want him to rest a week and be fully ready for the stretch run. And I think the Jaguars are actually doing the smart thing.
So how about is Chris Ivory a must play now based on what we've seen this week?
Unqualified, yes, because this, they're not going to veer away from their game plan anymore because Ivory can certainly carry the ball 18 to 25 touches. He can get that, and he's going to get that both as a runner and receiver. And yes, we may see more Yeldon or Grant sprinkled into this equation,
right.
But really, we've seen that there's not much of a drop-off when this offense really gets rolling. So whether it gets rolling or not won't have to do with the fact that Fournette's in this game as much as whether the offensive line is blocking well enough for Ivory. Now, Ivory may not break out 75-yard, 90-yard runs like Fournette does, but if you subtract like the big run from the equation from any of Fournette's weeks, those are the totals you should probably expect from Ivory.
And Ivory's also become an accomplished receiver. You were once one of the drivers of the TJ Yeldon bandwagon, or at the very least positive on his NFL future. Is this moment a moment to pick him up in dynasty leagues and potentially be ready to carry him for the next year and a half for what comes next? Because he's still young, because he was a second-round pick, because he's going to remind everyone that he's still a good player, just in a bad spot right now? Or maybe is it Corey Grant, or is this not really going to change the dynasty landscape that much?
Yeah, I don't think anything this is going to really change this dynasty landscape. But I think if you were to take a chance on a player, Yeldon is that guy. He still is a talent, and I know that there are people that weren't positive about them. But then again, nobody thought, the same people who are like Ivory's not that good were the same people who said Leonard Fournette wasn't going to do anything in this offense because this offensive line is bad. And so when you look at it from that equation, there are the same people who thought Todd Gurley was a bust after a bad year and all those types of things. So Yeldon's a talent. If he gets the right fit, that's the big if. And if you want to hold on to him for practically no cost to find out, it's worthwhile to check that out at the end of a deep roster.
Yeah, we'll be interested to see, because Ivory also gets hurt and also has turned into a wonderful, wonderful receiver. So, Gene, it feels like there's a stubbornness in Tennessee about DeMarco Murray. The script has been written. Their bye's next week. They could rest DeMarco Murray. Early reports are that they won't. I'm being extremely conservative, and I'm putting DeMarco Murray down in that Matt Forte range in my rankings this week because I don't see how he'll get more than 12 or 15 touches, and I don't see how he'll be effective on those touches. And I'm still being very aggressive with Derrick Henry. Am I ignoring the pattern here?
No, I think Murray's part of this stubbornness. I don't think you liked anything what you heard from Murray at all this week, and this is something that he's been fighting off and on for 2 months, this hamstring strain. He told reporters, these are the kinds of things you usually don't play on. And then in the same breath, he said, I would like to play, and then I'll worry about the aftermath when it's done, regardless of what the repercussions would be. And those are his exact words. So, you saw him on the sideline with a big rap. It's arguably been aggravated twice in the last 2 months. We've seen him try to play through these injuries before, including in week 3, where he didn't practice at all. And then not only did he play, but he had an even distribution of touches with Derrick Henry, somehow bumbled and rumbled and stumbled on a 70-some yard touchdown run. And I thought he looked a little bit limited doing so. However, everybody else around him looked like they were running in quicksand. The defenders were coming after him. So, if it weren't for his past history, you'd have to say that you really wouldn't trust DeMarco Murray at all today. But even in that game back then, I think, what did he have, 12 touches? What did I write here?
Yeah, it was basically
15?
like 3 yards.
14 carries.
Yeah.
So 14 carries and 1 touch. And then he had the 70-yard touchdown run that got him up to 115 on the day. But he played throughout the game, even including coming out after halftime, and seemed to be able to manage things okay. And he came back after halftime and had a pretty productive third quarter series after being wrapped in the first half last week. So I'm with you, however. I don't think there's any way, unless the game script is extraordinarily favorable, he's more effective than you expected him to be in the beginning. Something happens with Henry, either injury or ineffectiveness, for them to give him more than 15 carries today. And so at that point, you're hoping for goal line carries. You're hoping for him to somehow break another unexpectedly long run. I don't think that in any way can you expect a repeat of what happened in week 3, the last time we went through this. And somebody asked me, is it encouraging that they already made the decision to not elevate a practice squad running back on Saturday, and to where all these reports are out there long before pregame warmups this morning that he's going to be able to go? And I reply, I'm still more nervous about this than I am encouraged, because there's an obvious risk of aggravation. It's happened multiple times already, and they're rolling the dice every time that happens, that whatever tweak or aggravation occurs doesn't become something similar to what we've seen with Corey Davis and many, many others in the past, Danny Woodhead, where the idea is, okay, well, we've got a week to rest him afterward with a bye week. Well, that doesn't mean that if he has a little bit of soreness left over, that he avoids an aggravation that could be a 4 to 8 week injury. And, hopefully get through this game, and that's not the case. But my feeling is the same as yours. Be shocked if he gets more than 12 to 15 touches. And I would think that they try to lean on Henry a little bit more.
And should we be worried about, this is a dream matchup for tight ends, Cleveland, this year. Should we be worried about Delaney Walker?
To the extent that there was some soreness, that they chose treatment over practice on Friday. But we've seen Walker play through knee and soft tissue leg injuries in the past fairly effectively. The only level of concern here is that the soreness was pretty high up in his calf, which makes you wonder, the further you get away from the middle of the muscle belly, the higher a risk of an issue moving forward. So there's a little bit there, but Walker didn't seem to be too concerned. He was tweeting pictures of how he looked before he got on the plane yesterday, and there wasn't much concern from Mike Mularkey about it. And clearly, the Titans are ready to allow players, if they want to get out on the field, if they're close to being able to clear them. So I have less concern with Walker than I do with Murray.
Matt, how much effort are you putting into the shoehorning of Derrick Henry into your lineup this week?
If I had him, I would probably make the effort. And I think it's worthwhile to consider. I mean, I think the whole if we're going to go down the narrative street that we often like to go down with DeMarco Murray, let's remember he's 29 years old. He was a back at Oklahoma that when I first saw him play, he looked more like Reggie Bush than a thumper. He was a dynamic player, unbelievably athletic. And then he got hurt. He got a number of injuries. And his senior year, the reason he dropped so much is he played hurt during his senior year. His entire senior year, he was playing on an injury that was a difficult thing. And he toughed his way through it. And I think DeMarco Murray's looking at the fact that he's 29. He's got Derrick Henry nipping at his heels. This is his third team. He knows what's about to go down, and he obviously loves football. And he's a thinker. He may overthink things. He overthought the Cowboys and decided to go to the Eagles. But somehow, whether you liked how he did it or not, and the Eagles obviously didn't like how he did it, but he got himself out of there and he got himself traded so that he could actually play football. And I have to think that whatever he did that got them angry, he did just the right amount to get himself to a team that said, oh, we know what's here and we're going to use him. And I think he realizes that his opportunity to really play football as a starter at a high level is probably done for the next maybe 2 years left, depending if he goes somewhere else and ends up being the injury, kind of like what Ryan Matthews was to him. In Philadelphia, but that's really kind of the deal. So I think when you put all that together, Murray's like, forget it, man. I'm just going to play until basically I can't do it anymore and I lose what I have, even if it means I'm, facilitating that with playing on injury, because I know my time's limited and Derrick Henry's the next thing. So yes, the fact that was on the sideline last week and seemed like he was on a couple of times, I would look at this and agree everything with you and Gene. What's going on?
You did the same thing last year with that foot injury. He tried to find a way, and then they were debating surgery in January and did not. And he tends to play effectively in the situations, but it's just hard to see him. The touch distribution you just can't see it going in his favor.
He just doesn't have any oomph in his giddy up right now. Do you even flirt with playing Murray this week, Matt?
No, I mean, I think that.
If you had to play like Murray or Marlon Mack or something like that, I mean, would you still?
Yeah,
play?
then yes, because while everyone loves the woo of Marlon Mack, I know that DeMarco Murray has about 3 times the football IQ of Marlon Mack, and even though I may be wrong, and Mack gets 95 yards on 3 carries and fumbles a ball away, and then also has another 150 yards receiving today, whatever. I know that from a process standpoint, I'd rather have a smart back who knows what to do, as Gene just mentioned, even when hurt, to be able to get decent touches. And I've seen him do it in college, and I've seen him do it in the NFL, and it's the Browns. So yes, it's a safe floor. Now, if you need upside because you're way behind, because you didn't start Amari Cooper, or you got Amari Cooper started on you, and you need that hope and a prayer, then sure, pray that Marlon Mack does it for you. But it's a prayer.
It is a prayer. And I love that you brought up DeMarco Murray reinventing himself. And that's what's great about your RSP background. I remember the original Murray at Oklahoma, kind of like a more angular Darren McFadden, which goes back to Darren McFadden was kind of a more straight line Reggie Bush, but Darren McFadden was an outstanding receiver at one time, but extremely explosive, big play player. And then he had 2 catastrophic injuries at Oklahoma, I think. And he truly reinvented himself. And he sees what's going on with Marshawn Lynch. He saw what happened with Adrian Peterson. Not only is it that he has a chance to play football, but to play in a system with a coach that wants what he's got. Yeah. And that might not always be true. Gene, are we ready to throw in the white flag on CJ Precise at this point? I mean, I know this is I'm not one of your favorite questions, is a player injury prone or not, but has he gotten to that Ryan Matthews kind of level? Well, now we have to really say that we should just assume that he's not going to stay healthy for very long.
Well, I think what we know about Precise at this point is that the injuries he's had, he doesn't seem like he's recovered quickly from, and we don't know the extent of those, and maybe they were higher grade sprains and strains than what some other players have had to fight through. But you've got a player that fully practiced on Thursday and Friday, and Pete Carroll really didn't seem optimistic at all about him playing, kind of suggesting they wanted to give him one more week, knowing that they don't have Chris Carson. Maybe they like J.D. McKissick enough to do some of the same things that Precise does, but it's not a surprise at all to hear from Ian Rappaport this morning, or whoever it was, I can't remember, that said that, they weren't optimistic about him playing. So I don't know that we throw in the towel on him yet, but, when we hear him being banged up, I don't think that you can expect him to recover quickly either. It took him a little bit longer from last year's shoulder injury than maybe you would have expected. Again, he had a couple of weeks of what looked like full practice before they cleared him to return to a game, and that's what happened with the ankle here too. So it sounds like it's going to be one more week, but I don't think you can count on him from week to week at this point.
On this Giants-Seattle game, got a couple of angles to ask you about, Matt. First, is Orleans Darkwa the obvious waiver pickup that we all overlooked because he's Orleans Darkwa, because the Giants can't run the ball, but yet they did it last week. Mike Sullivan, been around for a while. You don't necessarily associate him with running game, but he put in that trap-based running game. DJ Fluker blotting guys out, turning them into little oil patches on the road. Is there more there? Is this week 2 of the Giants' power running team?
It's going to be interesting to find out. I mean, I think that the Seattle is a much tougher defense than Denver when it comes to the ground game, if you ask me. So we're going to see if that's for real. But we know that Dark was kind of like, Darkwa at his best is kind of like Murray while he's injured, which is basically a guy who's going to run in a straight line, who's going
Ben
to
Jarvis,
take what's
Green Ellis.
there. Yeah, he's going to take what's there and do the job right. It may not be pretty, but he's going to get it done. And I think that that's a worthwhile guy to take a shot on there. It's the ultra conservative running back pick for the week. But that you're going to get whatever they can get out of their offensive line with him in the lineup. So, I mean, I still wonder about Wayne Gallman, because I still think that, any given week he can go off. Yeah. Any given week can go off. But, you look at it from that standpoint, and I think that it's a scenario where you just kind of just hope for the best, I guess, and plug him in and hope that the Giants can block that Seattle front. And if they do that, then yeah, he's capable of a good day.
We'll come back to this game. Dr. Gene's going to be on assignment in a few minutes, so I want to go through a couple more injury situations. We're going to come back to this game. I want to talk a little more about Wayne Gallman, Matt, and you and I are going to sit down on the couch in a couple of days too. So we're going to have a lot of stuff to dig into. This is like an early preview of our week 8 couch session. Gene, Jameis Winston's going to play, but should he be in your lineup? Should you hesitate if you're thinking about a Deshaun Jackson or Cameron Braid or even Doug Martin? Should we hesitate? The Bills coming out of a bye, they've been a game, very competitive defense. What's our outlook, not on whether Jameis Winston will play, but whether he'll play well, with, of course, the background knowing that with Jameis Winston, we never really know if he's going to play well.
I'd be most worried about Deshaun Jackson. I think the deep accuracy is probably what you're most worried about. Players with a shoulder sprain up in that joint have a little bit of difficulty with a full range of motion. And even when they do, and it sounds like there really wasn't much concern with Winston, they allowed him to do whatever he wanted on Friday, which albeit isn't much in the NFL practices, but it's still important. And then they felt good enough about him that they didn't really have any concern that he was going to be limited on Saturday to still call him a game time decision. Dirk Kidder was telling people right away he was going to play. So I don't think there's too much concern there. Always when you're a quarterback, you can try to get your arm out of the way and protect yourself so that you're not taking hits on the shoulder. But you see Aaron Rodgers, Jameis Winston, Trevor Siemian, his situation was a little bit different, but that's hard to do when you've got 240, 300-pound guys coming after you and rolling over you. So there's always a risk that there's going to be an in-game aggravation here, but I think deep accuracy is going to be the primary issue, and you probably are not going to see him leave the pocket nearly as much from a rushing perspective, which he doesn't do a ton of anyway. But so I don't think I would fear Cam Braid. I don't think I'd fear Mike Evans much, other than, as you said, the usual inconsistency of that Tampa Bay offense. Probably would expect them to try to get a little bit more of the run game in, even more than they have with Doug Martin over the past couple of weeks already, but not too worried about Winston.
Let's go through a couple more so we can send you on your way, Gene. Melvin Gordon was shut down by Denver in week 1 to an extent, but still the centerpiece of the offense. Keenan Allen actually was passable for fantasy, not outstanding numbers, but scored a touchdown, had 5 catches in week 1. That Denver matchup notwithstanding. So we're coming in with our baseline expectations for Gordon and Allen, but they both have had some injury drama this week. Allen in particular falling on his shoulder on Thursday. There was some talk of potential game time decision. It looks like Gordon and Allen will play this afternoon.
Yes.
Do you downgrade the desirability of playing them, or do you basically have the same approach you would if they hadn't been on the injury report this week?
I would have the same approach with Gordon. As usual, Brandon Oliver is going to be back. He's fully practiced for a couple of weeks in a row. I would expect him to be active. He was a little bit of a surprising inactive last week. So maybe you see them limit some of his pass game snaps, Gordon's pass game snaps, but that really hasn't been the case earlier in the season. And it almost seemed like they were they could have just as easily listed Gordon as a not injury related situation where they were just giving him some rest from being banged up. It's probably better that you see him on the injury report with shoulder rather than knee, and that was kind of the big concern we had when he was taking a little bit fewer snaps, and the rushing offense wasn't working as well. Joe Barksdale still a little bit of an issue with the foot along the offensive line, but I don't think the injury is going to be an issue with Gordon. It's hard to know exactly where we are with Allen. Anthony Lidson said that Allen wanted to play on Friday. There's all indication today that that's what's going to happen. The fall on the shoulder, you're probably dealing with something similar to what Jameis Winston's dealing with. He hasn't had as much time to recover. We've seen shoulder injuries like this limit players like Randall Cobb in the past. We don't really know what the grade is, but it's nice to hear pretty early in the day here that he's going to play. So I wouldn't worry too much about that shoulder, other than there are multiple players at this point. The Chargers wide receiver group is pretty healthy. And the tight ends are healthy too. So there's lots of other options to use potential if things crop up on him during the game, but not too worried about either one of those players. I think Gordon is fine. Allen, we're probably not going to know until after the game just how limited he was.
And last one, Gene, Kelvin Benjamin. Luckily, there's not any artistic impression in terms of injuries, whether they're ugly. It was definitely his knee was ugly looking last Thursday night, but should that affect what our expectations of how pretty his fantasy line will be against Chicago today?
I don't think so right now. We talked on Thursday night, the hope was that when they sent him to the doctor, they were just draining something around the knee, whether it was a little bit of a contusion or something like this bursa sac issue that he's been now reported to have. That drainage should allow him to move pretty easily. He did exactly what you wanted to see, which is return to a full Friday practice. Doesn't seem to be any reason to suspect that he'll be limited today. Now, if he takes a twist or a hit and that thing sort of flares up a little bit and re-swells up, that could be a problem. But he returned to last week's game, after that happened, and I wouldn't be too worried about him either.
And we're never worried about setting our lineups when we have injury issues hovering over our heads because we've got Dr. Gene. And always check out everything he's doing at Football Guys, of course, Injury Expectations and the Waiver Wire Show and Thursday nights and everything. And Gene, you go on and spread your goodness and live your life in this world. We're happy we get what we get from you.
I should be around Twitter. I'm going to go watch my boys do what they do on the weekends. So taking off a little bit early. Thanks for indulging me, and if anything expected comes up, I'll try to be available to comment on Twitter. But you guys enjoy the games.
You too, enjoy the Greg Cook Invitational.
Ooh, jeez. Wow.
Good night now.
Right on the way out. Right on the way out. You're an assassin. Cold-blooded.
Just making Gene. I mean, we got to get Gene to cry at one point.
We do. Well, we found something with this Roethlisberger thing. Since he's not here, we can talk about this. Don't tell him. Everybody, don't tell him. We found the nerve. We found the nerve with this Roethlisberger thing. All right. Let's just go through some of these games and we can go off on tangents and things. We've got about 35 minutes here to spend with our wonderful people out there with us, spending Sunday morning with us. Let's start with that Tampa Buffalo game. I'm just going back to some of the games we touched on with some injury situations. Are you changing your approach to any Tampa players with this injury or with the fact, let's be clear, okay, Tampa, two of their good offensive performances were because Arizona and Minnesota blew them out so badly that they put on the brakes in the second half. They had an okay game against Chicago. Now, the Tampa Giants game was a good back and forth game, but this in the New England game, the offense, I think statistically, certainly in terms of points, it was the worst performance by any offense against New England this year. So we looked at this offense as the final pieces are falling into place. OJ Howard's run blocking and Deshaun Jackson, and now Doug Martin's back. So the running game and this young offensive line is gelling, and Winston going into his third year. It's not happening.
No, it's not.
Buffalo's been a very competitive, opportunistic game defense. They're coming out of a bye. They've had 2 weeks to prep with this one. Sean McDermott, we shouldn't underestimate him. So what's in the crystal ball for the Tampa offense today on the road?
I think you're looking at somewhere between 50 to 80 yards for Doug Martin, which isn't all that exciting. Maybe a touchdown. You're gonna have to hope the touchdown's going to either save or sink his fantasy value this week. Then you have to understand that these two cornerbacks that they have in Buffalo are pretty darn good.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like every week I watch them and early on somebody tests them and it's like, oh, it's on. And then like by the end of the game, you're like, wow, they actually acquitted themselves extremely well, especially Tre'Davious White.
Yeah.
I think Tre'Davious White, for a rookie cornerback facing guys like Emmanuel Sanders and Demarius Thomas and, you know, Julio Jones, and the way that he played against those guys in particular was very impressive. So you look at that and I think, well, he might hold up pretty well against Mike Evans, especially because Jameis Winston, I mean, he still has that potential to develop into a really good quarterback, but I don't think he's heading down that. His track has been pretty rough this year. So when you look at that, I would still give Evans a fighter's chance at wide receiver one totals, but he'd be on the lower end of that spectrum for me. Deshaun Watson, I'd just say forget it, because you're just hoping for a blown coverage and for basically Winston to find him in the first place. So that leaves basically Cameron Brate, who old reliable. And I think that old reliable is probably the guy that you're going to want to go to. He's the safest option. Mike Evans is the second safest option. I think Doug Martin is the Orleans Darkwa or option, in this particular scenario. And Deshaun Jackson is hope and a prayer.
If you had to go to the waiver wire for a quarterback this week, would you prefer Tyrod Taylor, who is going to get, we think, Jordan Matthews didn't get to ask Dr. G about this. Jordan Matthews, it looks like he's going to get back, may not materially change his outlook. Tyrod Taylor, who is a quick aside, his maturation as a quarterback, and I think probably out of our view, a leader off the field, has been an underreported story. Just because we see the way the Bills have been playing and taking on the personality of their coach and quarterback, and I think Sean McDermott is the front and center figure here, but I think Tyrod Taylor should be in this conversation too. Tyrod Taylor, or do you go to a Brett Hundley? Do you go to a CJ Beathard, a rookie who is in a better matchup than potentially better matchup, certainly has more to work with than Tyrod Taylor has to work with?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly understand that, but I mean, I kind of look at the Buffalo Bills heading into the season, and I think, what have they really had to work with other than LaShawn McCoy? I mean, to be honest, I mean, they don't have a wide receiver one. Jordan Matthews is not that. So when I look at this, and then I look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive game logs, and you look, and Mike Glennon put up 300, Case Keenum put up 369, Eli Manning put up 288, and he didn't probably even have, what he should have had. Which is Peyton Manning's acumen. Tom Brady had 303, and even Carson Palmer last week, 283 and 3 touchdowns. So when you look at that scenario, I think there's enough balance between run and pass. I don't think if you're looking for upside, I don't think Tyrod Taylor is your guy to go. But if you're looking for safety versus upside with boom bust upside, Brett Hundley's more boom bust for you. But me personally, I'm going to lean Brett Hundley. But, if you're one of those that I don't really know what to expect here, and the Saints you're listening to your analysis, Bloom, about the Saints defense, which I think is very good. You may go, I'd rather play it safe. And Tyrod Taylor, I think it's a very good point you raise about his story. Kyle Posey wrote an analysis about him last year at my RSP site. Detailing Tyrod Taylor and how he was underrated and a lot of things that he could do. And I think that the farther away he can be from Rex Ryan, the better, just like any quarterback. Yeah. So it's Rex Ryan may be a great coach in so many ways, but their offenses, the track record's there. They stink when, his offenses stink. And I think Tyrod Taylor has got associated with some of that. And we're seeing that, with some sensible coaching on the offensive side of the ball, you're starting to see a player who's better than what maybe he's looked like in the recent past.
I get the feeling that Tyrod Taylor is kind of a Colin Kaepernick type of quarterback, where if you ask him to do things that aren't natural for him, he will prove your case of him not being an NFL starting quarterback or something like that. But if you just do coaching that is relaxed and flow based and looking at a player and saying, this is what we have to work with, he's an NFL starting quarterback and then some. And
I'd just like to see us in a situation. I wish that we could change the axis of perception and look at I wish we could all try on for a moment that maybe Super Bowl winning quarterbacks or the league actually evolved, instead of from a static offensive under center shotgun, not moving much offense, and actually transitioned more to what the college game was. And we could look at it and see, oh, you know what? We could easily make a case that, we'd be saying that, the Tom Brady's and and Matt Ryan's of the world really aren't really NFL quarterbacks on a high level unless they're playing in specific offenses.
Right.
Because the Sean Watson, because what we're really looking for is lots of, play action and option reads and quarterback movement. And that really helps open up the game. And, these quarterbacks who don't do that, well, I mean, maybe one day we'll be able to say that if you put them in the right offense, they work fine. Every quarterback is a put them in the right offense quarterback. It's why some quarterbacks who are pocket players who wind up in pocket offenses but aren't really good fits for what that offense does still hurts them. It's really about individual fit, but we don't like to look at the details.
No, we don't. NFL offensive coordinators, unless you have a statue, should be moving the quarterback more by design and forcing the defense to react by design.
Alex Smith, that hint was there in the famous Cecil Lammey Alex Smith went gonzo game against New Orleans when he was running more. And when he runs more and can move east to west with his running, oh my goodness, the vertical game opens up for him.
Yeah, tremendous stuff. Whenever these quarterbacks are comfortable, Denver. Alex Smith will stay over in the AFC West. Talk about Denver and the Chargers today. Do you go back to the well with CJ Anderson? This is the best matchup on paper, and certainly watching the games. The Chargers tackling has been very poor. The Broncos win when they give Anderson 20 plus carries. They aren't going to mess this up, right? Or do you look at the way they've used Booker, look at the way they've used Charles, look at the way they use Anderson, fluctuating between 20 carries, 9 carries. Anderson's not even on the injury report. There's not even some reason. This is just how they've been handling it week to week. How close do you get to this electric fence?
Considering that the games where he's had 20 touches were against really bad defenses, and 2 of the 3 were against AFC West opponents, I would go with that, even though I hate that there's really nothing there other than it's just fancy window dressing stats that I just brought up.
Sure.
But I'd still go with that. I still think that's good, even though if I were to project my imagination of what I see in the Denver front office right now, it would be a dartboard with CJ Anderson's picture on it. That John Elway put up there the minute that CJ Anderson got the better of them a couple of years ago. And, I think he has always admitted this, so it's quiet. Yes, I do have input in personnel and coaching, and I do talk with the coaches, and I do this. Yeah. And it's a nice way of saying he has a little bat phone that he has down to Vance, down there, and basically tells him what he wants, or he gets mad. And I'm sure that there's petulant child moments from our favorite GM who probably is like, I don't like the CJ Anderson guy. If Charles even looks halfway healthy, we need to get more for Charles. And I even said this week, we're going to ramp up Charles. It's been expected. That could also be code for John told me to. So, I mean, I'm messing around, and I'm not all that serious about all this. I just like picking on John Elway, but I think Anderson's safe, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little added bit there that they don't like him.
You should have sacked him. You should have sacked him in that Starbucks. You'll never get that chance again.
Oh, I have all the. I still have all the. Satisfaction that 2 guys interviewing cut him off to talk to me, which was like,
oh yeah, hilarious. You made it. You made it. So let's put the CJ Anderson stuff to the test real quick. Okay. CJ Anderson or Joe Mixon against the Steelers?
I think you got to go Anderson. It's just safer.
Okay. CJ Anderson or Alvin Kamara against Green Bay?
See, that's one. If it's PPR, I might be leaning towards Kamara for the upside, but it's pretty even.
CJ Anderson or LeGarrette Blount against Washington tomorrow night?
Wow. I'm still going to go Anderson, even though I'm always been.
This is like the old segment on the couch that I used to do, where we would finally find the break point. CJ Anderson or Dion Lewis against Atlanta tonight?
The way it should work, I think the conservative bet is still probably Anderson, but I love Lewis, and I'm starting him in every league that I got him.
And Kevin Coleman in that same game.
I go with Anderson. I'll still go with Anderson over that.
Doug Martin or CJ Anderson?
Woo, Anderson. I still think Anderson's a pretty darn good play. I think he's a mid-range to high running back too. There's just a boom bust element based on what we talked about.
No, I think that's all. I think that's all very fair. Carolina, Chicago. My angle I want to ask you about this game is Cam Newton had 2 games where he looked like 2015 Cam Newton. Now, last week he put up good fantasy numbers, like 25 points or so. He is getting the design runs. He did score a touchdown on a designed run last week, but he also threw the ball 52 times. He also threw 3, should have been 4 picks, and he wasn't as effective. He was effective. I'll say this against Philly, and it is a pressure defense, so this is important. It's not trivial. He was effective at making the right read, zeroing in on usually Kelvin Benjamin, getting the ball out quickly in a good spot to defeat pressure. But he wasn't the quarterback he was in the previous 2 weeks. So you have choice. Sometimes you might have some choices now with Cam Newton. Maybe you have Cam Newton and another quarterback. So we can start with this week against Chicago, a defense that has been pretty game and competitive at home. You know, they limited Atlanta, they limited Pittsburgh. They have been a pretty decent defense at home. Do you go back to the well with Cam Newton? And do you expect Cam Newton to level off as a fantasy quarterback? Maybe not at 2015 levels, but he's basically in your lineup for the rest of the year levels. Or do you think there's some turbulence coming?
I think there's a roller coaster in Carolina. I just haven't liked the whole Cam Newton deal this past year and even last year. I mean, I like Cam Newton as a quarterback overall, but I just don't particularly. I'm not in love with this offense yet. It's still much a work in progress. You see moments of where it could go and what they're going to try and do with it, but it just doesn't seem smooth yet because honestly, they don't have a wide receiver 1. Kelvin Benjamin would be a great wide receiver 2. But that's all they have. Devin Funchess might be a wide receiver 1, but he's in the same mode, just a little bit more fluid. Maybe he might get there, but they don't have a guy that defenses go, this guy will kill us physically and conceptually if we give an inch, if we make a little mistake. I mean, they should have won that game against Philadelphia last week. And one of the reasons that they missed it is that there was a route miscommunication with Kelvin Benjamin and Cam Newton. And this is a common thing. To me, Kelvin Benjamin is a more mature. I don't even want to go there. That would be Kelvin Benjamin seems to be a guy that has a lot of ability, but it's confined to a certain amount, types of skills that aren't all wide receiver 1 caliber. Sure. And when you look at this, the Bears defense, I mean, look, the only 2 performances that I would be glad to have started them there was Aaron Rodgers. He had 179 yards, but he had 4 touchdowns. And Matt Ryan in the opener with 321 and 1 touchdown. The rest of these opportunities were dogs. I mean, you know, and when you look at the teams, I mean, Roethlisberger, Case Keenum was playing well until recently. You know, Joe Flacco, yeah, we understand. Yeah. Ryan, you know, Jameis Winston should have happened. You know, but I think I've watched the Bears and I think their defense has been pretty good. And so when you look at Carolina, the 2 teams that they've played well against, the Detroit and New England. Okay, so I think I'm looking at that right. Let me take a look back where I was. Detroit, New England. So when you look at that from that scenario, I'm just like, this isn't a team that I feel all that confident about. There'd be a lot of guys that I would consider over Cam Newton, I think.
I'm going to New Orleans for Thanksgiving. Kate and I are going to go to New Orleans for Thanksgiving, and tell me that the Saints are going to be leading the division by Thanksgiving.
You know, that's a real possibility. Isn't that odd that that's the case?
They're 3-2.
Yeah, they really are. And when you look at ahead, I mean, Green
Bay's 14-16 against Atlanta. That's where the division's going to be decided right there.
Yeah, I mean, Green Bay's vulnerable. The Bears obviously are vulnerable. Because their offense is vulnerable. Tampa Bay, we've seen what's going on there. So I mean, yeah, I mean, you might be. Is Thanksgiving going to be Buffalo or Washington that week? I'm trying to remember, or is it maybe the Rams? But they may very well have a shot at it. I still think they're a shaky one, but hey, if they lean on that run game a little bit more,
And the opportunistic defense. Alex Okafor and Cameron Jordan, and hopefully Sheldon Rankins gets going.
Yeah, and Lattimore seems to be playing decently. So
yeah, definitely.
So that's not bad. I still think that the Packers have a really good shot to beat them this week. But I'm the Brent Hundley optimist. So that's
and I am too, based on what I saw last week after going back watching the Minnesota game. New Orleans is just New Orleans is always a fun place to be, but it's even more fun when the Saints are good. When the Saints are good, the city just has a certain
fried turkey, man. Get some fried turkey.
Oh, absolutely. We'll get a lot of everything. Too much of everything. That's the recipe for New Orleans. Let's talk about that New Orleans Green Bay game. So we have the New Orleans offense. Let's take the New Orleans side first. You have the New Orleans offense, but it's outdoors. It's on the road. It's at Lambeau. As you said, lean on those running backs, and they have a good recipe with Ingram and Kamara. Drew Brees it's been, even after the 0-2 start, it's been a successful beginning of the season for the Saints. 3-2, defense is starting to create things, but this isn't the Drew Brees and Saints offense we've seen for basically the whole time it's been New Orleans. We're not seeing vertical shots, really. We're not seeing him just running it like a point guard. I think some of that is Willie Snead's been banged up, and he's still banged up. Some of that is Kobe Fleener's a waste, so they still are getting very little from the tight end position. Some of that is that Michael Thomas is not a big downfield receiver. He's more of a short, intermediate range guy who does some damage after the catch. Maybe some of that's Teron Armstead easing his way back in now. Maybe there's more time to throw downfield. Green Bay isn't exactly a scary pass rush team. So we have a couple of modes to look at, and Brett Hundley's going to play a role in this. Because if Brett Hundley can land some punches too, can counter in this game, then maybe this could be a better passing game. Maybe this could be a game where you're more interested. It is a banged up Packer secondary too. You're more interested in a Ted Ginn. In Daly, you might be more interested in Drew Brees, even though it's outdoors and on the road. Or do you think Brett Hundley does enough to consider starting him, but not enough to make New Orleans offense truly open up? And this is an Ingram and Kamara day. How does this Saints offense get it done today?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. It's enough for Hundley to keep this game close, and for them to kind of have the Saints offense to have a balanced game because of what Hundley can do. You look at it from this scenario. I mean, while it's funny for us to be talking about Drew Brees and saying that, he's been all right, but he hasn't been what we've come to expect from Drew Brees. Whereas, last week he threw 2 interceptions. It was the first 2 interceptions he threw all year, and he's had multiple touchdown games every week except for the opener. So when you look at those scenarios, I'm going, it's so funny how high of an expectation we have for Drew Brees. It just tells you how great he's been. So when you look at, the Saints at this point, in their defense, you understand that, okay, they allowed Sam Bradford to have nearly 350. Tom Brady had nearly 450. And Matthew Stafford on a bum leg still threw 3 touchdowns and had over 300 yards. So the thing is, though, is that when you go take a look at the quarterbacks that didn't get it done, it's Jay Cutler and Cam Newton. Well, what do they have in common with?
They shut them down.
They shut them down. And what do they have in common with Brett Hundley? Well, Brett Hundley may not be as experienced as the first set of 3 guys, and may be more prone to mistakes and miscommunications and issues that come with new quarterbacks, with new, in the starting lineup. And Jay Cutler certainly fits that bill, and Cam Newton fits that bill with the receivers that he has. So, maybe the rapport will be there, and he knows what he's supposed to do with this offense. So I expect him to do better than Cam Newton and Jay Cutler, but I don't expect him to if he puts up, over 300 yards, doesn't throw more than 1 interception, then that would be a great day for Brett Hundley as his really starting debut. But I would expect more, somewhere between about 260 to 280 in the air, maybe 1 touchdown on the ground, 1 touchdown through the air, maybe 2, but it's probably going to be like 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and maybe a rushing touchdown to tip the favor in him. But it's still going to be slightly mixed for those who need to see a stat line that's going to say 350 for 4 touchdowns, and you go, oh yeah, he's for real. And then when they look at the 270 for 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and 1 rushing touchdown, they go, I don't know. I'm not sold on him. The box score jockeys, when they start doing that. So Yeah, I mean, I think the run game will be there. I think the run game will be decent if they can figure it out in Green Bay who it's going to be. But I feel good about starting Hundley, but I think what it means is that Drew Brees, it's going to be more conservative passing attack because they don't have Brandon Cooks, they don't have a deep threat. So yeah, it's going to be more about him picking that team apart and using balance and using their big plays with the running backs through the air and on the ground.
The good news for Hundley is that Brian Bulaga and David Bakhtiari are expected to play, and he's not facing Minnesota this week. New Orleans offense has improved. Its defense has improved. It's not Minnesota. And I like tossing a number like 260 or 280 out there because what it implies, and you can co-sign on this, I think Jordy Nelson is not a wide receiver 1, but he's a wide receiver 2. I think Devontae Adams is not a wide receiver 2, but he's a wide receiver 3 flex type play. And I would be more inclined to talk myself into playing them than talk myself out of playing them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I've kind of implied or written this week in the gut check column about Brett Hundley and his prospects and why. And a lot of that is when you look at what he did well in the Minnesota Vikings game, it was throwing to the outside. I mean, with one exception of the interception outside where it was just kind of a mistimed rub route and he didn't place it well where he should have. And it was a really nice angle played by Xavier Rhodes. I believe that was him who cut it off. Most, the back shoulder throws, the deep outs, those were there. The timing throws on the outside were there. The issues that he had were over the middle for the most part. And it was, blitzes.
Reading coverage. There was one that he just didn't read the linebacker dropping the coverage and threw it right to him.
Yeah, he threw one there, and then he had one where Harrison Smith dropped in the coverage off of a double A gap blitz, and then the safety was in the box and he dropped, and Hundley didn't see that either. So there's some of that, but Hundley's also going to be able to create on the move. And unlike Stafford, who was a sitting duck and who got nailed all game long, good luck with the New Orleans Saints defense because Hundley's the guy like Wilson, like Luck, like a lot of good quarterbacks. They wait till the last second and then they move fast and reset and fire. And we saw that a lot even against the Vikings, where when he got outside, it was like, he got all the time in the world, and that's a very Aaron Rodgers like too. So he's going to buy opportunities. It's just whether he's going to see the field clearly enough to make them, and he stands in there. Yeah. So I like his options. I like his odds there. It's just that I think that he will have some mistakes because look, he's fresh fish, entering the Superdome here. So it's going to be, he's going to have some of those moments, even like Andy Dufresne did.
Every new quarterback, no matter how good they are, has those moments. But the picture you're painting, I think, is accurate. That he'll stare down the barrel, take a hit to make a throw. He's not a rushed thinker or flustered in the pocket, even under pressure. And boy, he got a lot of practice at dealing with pressure last week. A lot of practice with taking hits last week. Even the interceptions were accurate throws. It wasn't that he was spraying the ball or inaccurate or his mechanics. And I still believe that mechanics are downstream from mindset. So, and whenever we see faulty mechanics, that just means that the thinking is rushed or the quarterback isn't trusting himself. And that's why then you see it reflected in mechanics. The point is we didn't see any of that from him. We didn't see any of that. So it should be fun to watch and evaluate him. I noticed that you just glossed over, you didn't even mention the name CJ Beathard when I threw out Beathard. And he has a matchup against a Dallas that has just been paying off week after week after week. And we saw the San Francisco offense really respond to him in Washington. They weren't responding with Brian Hoyer. And let's face it, and this is another one of those narrative type things that if you don't think your quarterback gives you a chance to win, look at how Miami was playing with Jay Cutler. We'll get to that game. We got about 10 minutes left. But if you don't believe your quarterback is giving you a chance to win, it's hard. It's hard. I mean, maybe someone like Carlos Hyde, who's following in the footsteps of Frank Gore in the sense of always laying it out there, but it's difficult. CJ Beathard, you saw this offense really come to life, and there was a really questionable offensive pass interference call on Pierre Garçon, or we might have been talking about CJ Beathard leading San Francisco to win on the road in Washington against a very solid Washington team in a very auspicious first game in the NFL. Are we underestimating him? Are we underestimating Pierre Garçon, George Kittle, Carlos Hyde? On paper, this looks like a good matchup for San Francisco. CJ Beathard played well in the second half last week. Is there something I'm missing here?
No, I mean, I think that even, what you have him projected for, which is about, 20 or 33, 198 yards and a touchdown and interception, maybe a shot at 2 touchdowns. I think that's reasonable for him against the Cowboys. You've seen what Jared Goff did. Yeah, he was in the 200. A lot of the quarterbacks who weren't the top quarterbacks, but growing, developing young players against Dallas seem to be in the 220 to 240 range in yards. And I think that's probably likely there. I liked Beathard in college as a developmental player. It's funny. I know someone who knows that program pretty well and mentioned that Beathard was a guy that before he got hurt seemed to be more of a gunslinger and a guy who really, seemed to have the arm that you're looking for to play. And I certainly saw evidence of that arm against Michigan State. And he shows some savvy in the red zone. He's a quick thinker, but he also knows how to extend the play just enough. And I think that he's going to find that balance in the NFL and be pretty good at it. And he's got a better arm than people realize. And he played in a pro system. So it's a really nice match. And that's why I think that, Shanahan really liked him, was that this was going to be an easy transition from what Iowa did to what, the 49ers are doing. And he is a savvy he's a kid with moxie who plays tough. He played hurt. His teammates liked him, and he's someone who can learn to be a little bit more efficient. He may take some chances that you don't like, but he's kind of a plus version of Brian Hoyer physically. And Hoyer's kind of got those same qualities. That's why they liked him. But his arm isn't quite there on that level. And I think CJ Beathard is closer to that mark. It's just the experience factor needs to be there. So yeah, I'd be optimistic about him as maybe a desperation starter and definitely as a mid-range quarterback too, possibility in 2 QB leagues.
Are you twitchy? Is there a little tick in your finger as you go to put JHI in the lineup, or do you feel like Miami's got this straightened out now?
Who are they playing? I forget.
Jets. Jets. Jets.
Oh yeah. That's funny. So, you look at that and you think about the Jets and what they've allowed, and it's kind of an up and down deal when you look at just the box score. But then when you think about the teams that they've played when that's happened, I do think, you look at a Jay, he's 11 for 16 output,
week 3.
Week 3. Yeah, and that looks kind of scary. But I do think they figured this out, and I think they realized that Jay Ajayi to me is the perfect example of if the NFL were more prone to do what they did with Adrian Peterson last week, that Jay Ajayi would be that guy. Now, scouts, I think, evaluate running backs as if they're going to be used like Adrian Peterson. I think coaches and teams evaluate running backs if they're going to be used like Giovanni Bernard and Jeremy Hill. And I think that's kind of the problem. And so analysts often say running backs aren't the way they used to be. And Jay's on limited time. I think the reports about him being on limited time due to his knee was based on the expectation that he was going to touch the ball 18 to 25 times a week. And that he'd be, it'd be 2-3 years, and then that would be it for him. But the way that they milk this, it may not, we've seen where he's carried it like that. And I think when the Dolphins figure out, okay, we're going to commit to him, then it'll work out. And I think they're going to commit to him. I would take my chances.
In Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, we've talked a little bit about Joe Mixon, just indicating some pessimism. And the Steelers know Andy Dalton, the common, uncommon opponents work from Joe Goodberry. This is a very common opponent. It's in Pittsburgh. Andy Dalton has not played his best football in Pittsburgh. We know that A.J. Green's going to get a lot of targets. The Cincinnati side's not that interesting. Pittsburgh side, we do get a report about Martavis Bryant maybe having a larger role from Ian Rappaport. There was some talk that he was asking for a trade. He denied it, but of course he's going to deny it. Ben Roethlisberger hasn't been playing all that well, but he is back at home where he tends to play better. Do you, with these forces converging around Martavis Bryant, do you try to find a way to get him in, or have we seen enough to say that this isn't Ben Roethlisberger from 2 or 3 years ago that was really able to harness what Bryant had to offer, and it ain't going to happen?
It's funny. I mean, you look at that and you think, well, the Browns seem to get 64 yards out of Ricardo Lewis and
Yeah.
52 out of Kenny Britt, who I don't know how Kenny Britt's still on a team. And especially after what we heard about last week, this guy, I mean, I don't usually go off about character and off-field stuff. If anything, I'm more of an apologist probably about certain behaviors. But when you've proven time and time again that you're a knucklehead, and that you don't really care about working with your teammates, and you don't care about, staying out of trouble or doing stupid things that violate team rules. I just think, I think Kenny Britt is not long for this league, and it's, whatever. So anyway, you look at these teams and how it's kind of played out. You're looking at guys who are kind of long, lean, can win the ball in the air type of players who seem to do pretty well against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Or at least can. And I think when you see it from that standpoint, Martavis Bryant fits the part to be able to get that type of production. And the Bengals are a little banged up at safety, I believe, if I remember that correctly. So I would look at this and I'd say he's worth a shot. If you can get him in as your flex, you definitely do him as a flex. But I don't think that's the real question. The real question is he going to be a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 for you? And I'd still say the answer is no. But if you're desperate due to bye weeks, and we do have a lot of bye weeks this week, I can see how you do shoehorn him.
Would you play Bryant or Eric Decker against Cleveland?
Wow, I go for Bryant, but I'm the upside guy. I like upside, so yeah, Decker to me. Yeah, good last week.
Let me give you some upside plays. Bryant or Ted Ginn against Green Bay. Willie Snead just reported will not play today.
Oh, I've got to go with Ted Ginn.
Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, moving Ginn up. Bryant or Smokey off the injury report in London against the Rams.
I'm going to say Brown, but my first initial reaction without even thinking about it is Bryant.
What about Bryant or Nelson Aguilar against Washington? Sans Josh Norman.
I would still, I'm still going to go with Bryant. I just think that there's enough weapons in Philly that they don't need Aguilar, even though he's played extremely well.
I got this question in Twitter, and I already answered it, but I'm curious of your thoughts. As we look ahead to rematch 28-3 tonight, Atlanta and New England. Taylor Gabriel or now off the injury report, Mohamed Sanu?
I think that if Sanu practiced all week, and that's the thing that I got. If he practiced all week,
off the injury report,
then you're going to go with Sanu. But if he didn't, then I would say maybe Gabriel. I just dropped Gabriel, and you picked him up in another league. So it's fun.
He's going to get deep. If he had just caught the touchdown instead of Marvin Hall last week, we would have seen him as a success and build up some momentum here. If you had to pick one, if you're digging deep and you're picking one, Rams, you said buys this week, Houston and Detroit, and injuries and stuff. If you had to pick one Rams receiver, not Sammy Watkins going against Patrick Peterson, Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods?
I'm still picking Kupp, even though I like Woods. But I think that those safeties in Arizona have been making a lot of mistakes. I've noticed that a lot in their games. They play well, make some interceptions, and they're big play, splashy guys, but there's still mistakes there. I know that Justin Bethel is probably a guy that's a really wonderful matchup, but I think Kupp and Woods will both draw them. And Kupp has been, the leading rookie receiver in the NFL right now, and I'm still going to go with him as when he's had games that weren't so good, they've been close calls to being very good ones.
Last minute here. I made my list. I've checked it twice, 3 times, probably like 25 or 30 times by now. Is Santa Claus coming to town this week, Matt?
Yeah, man. Santa Claus is back. Santa Claus is back, and he is I love it. I just think I think he's ready to go, and I don't think it was a game situation thing. I mean, yes, there'll be some of that involved with it, but the idea that Andre Ellington wasn't a running back one due to game situation is some sort of attention getting semantics in my end, from my perspective about it, as opposed to actual real analysis, which is that, Andre Ellington never fit this offense. The Adrian Peterson fits this offense and what they've wanted to do.
Yeah. The football gods take Odell Beckham. They take JJ Watt. They take Aaron Rodgers. They giveth Adrian Peterson. Doing some, hey, Emmitt Smith wasn't bad when he was with the Cardinals. He wasn't bad even for fantasy. but Adrian Peterson could be better.
So I have a question for you
Yeah,
because
please.
I just wonder, you know how like I think if you saw Bull Durham, I think there was a scene where or somebody, one of those baseball movies where one of the
Right.
catchers gets in a fight with, on purpose to fire up the team
Yeah.
and then kind of watch from the sideline. I just want to ask you, how much do you believe Marshawn Lynch was playing the Crash Davis or the catcher role on
Maybe.
Thursday night?
I still think, and this is a sign of, and look, folks, I'm the mayor of Meredith Street. I may let emotion play into my fantasy football too much as I'm learning, as I'm discovering myself in my 40s. Maybe I haven't been in touch with my emotion enough. Maybe I haven't been in touch with my emotion. Maybe fantasy football is how I get in touch with my emotion, and I still see to go to the point underneath this. In my mind's eye, and you and I are going to go down with the ship together on this one. I think we may have our life jackets on. In my mind's eye, I still see come mid-November, December, Lynch is getting 20 carries a game. Lynch is getting, like, there's a mode, the beast mode, right? The Raiders go beast mode, and I know the offense looks better, and maybe the defense doesn't allow them to do this. Maybe the defense just doesn't allow them to do this, but I still see Marshawn Lynch as a very important part of this team. I still see, I think he might be a little bit frustrated a bit, but this is one of those things, winning cures everything, right? Like, he's frustrated with his role because they were losing. But if they're winning, then this is going to be fun. So playing Buffalo next week, he's not going to be playing. He's probably, I'll put it out there like this. If he's dropped, pick him up immediately. And if you're dealing with a team that has Marshall Lynch, try to get him as a throw-in. I don't think we've heard the last from him. So we'll go down together. This will be Thelma and Louise over the cliff.
That's right. Pretty much. We need to, we've got Santa Claus. So I don't know what this is, but
Krampus.
Yeah. Krampus.
It's wonderful, folks. It is really, really wonderful to get to share this journey.
It's like a role reversal with Peterson and Lynch. Really,
it is wet blanket. Krampus. And it's by the way, Matt, I don't know if you noticed in the chat room on Thursday night, I don't remember which player it was we threw to you, and you started saying, well, I don't know. And everyone in the chat was like, wet blanket Waldman. Here's a wet blanket Waldman. We've incorporated that into your
and the tie-dyed angel. Yeah.
It's beautiful, folks. No, but to get to share this with everybody every week, it's a real joy. It's a real privilege, and just to get to watch everything unfold here in the NFL. And we're in that perfect lined up time when all four major sports are playing. College football, unbelievably stimulating. College basketball is just around the corner. The U.S. men's team isn't making the World Cup, but the sports world continues to stimulate us. You stimulate us, and it's great to be here. So we will be back. Matt Waldman on the couch coming up this week, and Audible 8 days a week football guys, so on and so forth. We're there for you. You're there for us. We're there for each other. We love you because, well, you're always so classy.